everyone, it's Ajanette and I'm back to wrap up with cognitive social learning theory. This is the last of 3 learning theories we've discussed in this chapter. So we've already discussed classical conditioning or Pavlovian conditioning. Then we've discussed operant conditioning, and the third learning theory is social learning theory. So with Pavlov and classical conditioning, it's stimulus response. There's not a whole lot of individual thought or perception involved. With operant conditioning and Skinner, it's all about consequences. Again, there's no allowance for individual thoughts and perceptions about those consequences. For cognitive social learning theory, it's a little bit different. Rather than just a stimulus response, it takes into consideration the organism, how we process that stimulus, what we mentally think of that stimulus, our own individual perceptions of that stimulus, our expectations, attitudes, beliefs. All of those individual factors might influence the response to the stimulus because we interpret different stimuli and circumstances differently. I hate exercise, so my attitude toward exercise is very different than somebody who might be an athlete, and they might love it and it might be motivating and encouraging. So to me, exercise is more of a punishment. For others, it might be a stress relief or a reward. So it's really important that we take into consideration the organism and our individual thoughts and perceptions. Additionally, we're social creatures. Not just animals, but human beings are animals. We learn through watching others, so we learn through observation, and we imitate others. In fact, we have mirror neurons built into us that indicate that we are predisposed toward imitation. So if you ever take a biopsych class, you'll study mirror neurons. Also, with Wolfgang Kohler did this monkey study, where what he did is he put monkeys in a cage and he put a banana just outside the cage. He gave the monkeys a stick, so they had to use the stick to they couldn't reach the banana with their arms, so they had to use the stick as a tool to gain access to the banana. And then so they figured that out. Then he gave them 2 sticks that needed to lock together in order to be long enough to reach the banana. And so what happened was the monkeys would try to reach the banana, and they tried one stick and tried another stick, and they couldn't do it. So they'd go on about their business playing. And then all of a sudden, it was like the light bulb went on. They were like, they're playing with the sticks. They lock together. They continue playing, and then they realize, oh, shit, I can use this now. It's a longer stick. I can use it to access my bananas. And so then they'd go back and use it as a tool. So through that trial and error, what's happening is they're kind of learning solutions, and then they get this insight learning that occurs, and they can apply a solution for one problem to fix another problem. Edward Tolman found kind of a similar related factor with studying rats in cages, and he would put these rats in mazes. And what he found is rats that were given cheese at the end of the maze would solve the maze faster, and they'd get to the end. And the other rats would just kind of wander around the maze. And so when you would put the rats that just kind of wandered around and never really solved the maze in a quick manner, if you added cheese as a reinforcement, all of a sudden they were like, boom, lightning through that maze. And so what he determined was they form like these cognitive maps. There's this latent hidden learning that's going on where it's familiar. You don't consciously realize that you're learning, but you are in fact learning. It's just hidden. And so the same thing was thought to happen with humans, in that we do kind of learn and we have this mental process involved. It's not purely stimulus response, and it's not purely consequences. So Albert Bandura is our final theorist, and Albert Bandura is one of my favorite theorists. His theory is observational learning or social learning theory, or it's called modeling theory. And Bandura is famous for the Bobo doll experiment, where he put these children, they would watch a video, and the video, they were either in a control group or experimental group. The control group, they weren't exposed to any type of aggressive modeling. In the experimental group, they were exposed to a model beating up a Bobo doll. And a Bobo doll was just a blow-up plastic doll with sand at the bottom. I grew up with them. I don't know if they still have them. But it was like a punching bag. You'd punch it and it'd pop back up, punch it and it'd pop back up. So they watched this video of this model beating up the Bobo doll, and I encourage you to watch the video too on your own. And the model would beat up the Bobo doll, and what they found is children that were exposed to the aggressive modeling were more likely to be aggressive toward Bobo. Not only were they more likely to be aggressive, but they were also more likely to start acting aggressively with other toys and to take other toys that weren't meant to be aggressive. Like, they would be more attracted to aggressive toys like guns and bats and things of that nature. But then they were using toys that aren't supposed to be used for aggression, like a phone or a purse, to beat up on Bobo. So Bobo just really got pummeled by the children who were exposed to the aggressive modeling. This was our first experiment that really demonstrated observational learning. And it came at a really interesting time because television was thought to negatively influence children's behavior, and this kind of laid the groundwork for this notion that watching aggressive TV can in fact lead to aggression in children, and research has supported that. Bandura suggested that we really have to go through these steps in order for observational learning to occur. We have to attend to the information or the behavior. So this is where the mental organism process comes in. We have to pay attention to it. We have to have some mental ability to retain that information, to process that information, and for us to reproduce that behavior or model or imitate that behavior, we need to have the physical ability or the motor skills to reproduce that behavior. And then finally, we're going to reproduce that behavior more often if it's reinforced. So you do have, this is all kind of tied to an operant learning approach, in that the consequences matter. If it's reinforced, we're going to repeat it. If it's punished, we may not. We can also learn from watching others get punished. So let's talk about just some other factors involved in learning. First of all, rat studies have shown that rats raised in enriched environments where they have lots of toys and they have exercise wheels and they have socialization available, so other little rats to play with, and then compare them to rats that are raised in depraved environments where they don't, or deprived environments where they don't have a lot of toys, they don't have exercise, they're socially isolated. Their brains literally are different. The rat brains from enriched environments are denser and they're more abundant neural connections versus the deprived environments. We've actually found that human beings have this same issue, and when we look at children raised in poverty, their brains are actually much less active and dense than children raised in really enriched childcare and home settings. Additionally, I mentioned the mirror neurons earlier, where we really do have these mirror neurons that are activated during functional MRIs. When we see somebody that's sad, these neurons are activated and they help us kind of relate and empathize with those feelings. And even young babies, you put them in front of you and you smile and they smile. You stick out your tongue, they stick out your tongue. And these neurons are active as they're imitating you. So there does appear to be this biological foundation for us to imitate and engage in modeling behavior. And then finally, and then another issue is we know that there's adaptive value, or there's an evolutionary purpose in learning. We have reflexes and instincts that contribute to our survival, like sucking. We don't have to be taught how to suck. It's innate. And kind of when we talked about classical conditioning and what's that natural pairing, Well, we're kind of built to have or to be predisposed to certain responses based on certain stimuli. Involuntary taste aversion, if I eat something that makes me ill, I'm predisposed to developing an intolerance for it and an aversion toward it because there very well could have been things that if I consumed them in evolutionary times, I could have died and it would have wiped out the species. So we very quickly learn to associate that stimuli with the behavioral response or emotional response to promote our survival. Additionally, we have this natural readiness when we are talking about like taste aversion. You know, there might be someone else present, or, you know, another animal present when I eat something. I know what is causing me to be sick. I develop an aversion toward the food that I ingested, not the person I was with. So, or not a sound that may have occurred while I was eating it. So this biological preparedness has some logic as to what stimuli and responses are connected. And then finally, there's instinctive drift, where you can try to train animals away from their natural and biological behaviors, but ultimately they drift back to kind of what's natural for their behavior and their instinct. So they give you an example of training a chicken to play baseball, and sometimes they just run off and peck because that's kind of their natural instinctive behavior. So as much as we try to train these animals, and we saw that with SeaWorld, as much as we try to train these animals, they are still very much animals, and they can revert back to their instincts. So in some situations, you know, it's really important to be mindful of that. And then finally, I want to discuss that conditioning can apply in everyday life, particularly in the area of prejudice. For classical conditioning, there was actually a study done, the Rogers study, that showed that, you know, children were less likely to want to play with black baby dolls and more likely to choose to play with white baby dolls. And when asking for their rationale, it's because they associated good qualities with the white baby dolls and negative qualities with the black baby dolls. And even black children were less likely to play with the black baby dolls. And that's often how prejudice develops, where we see black children or black people or people of color portrayed in these negative ways on media, and we might associate those negative qualities with that race. We talked about how it could be involved in phobias, such as Jessie developing a phobia of tacos, and then we talked about marketing. Operant conditioning, again, now this is reinforcement. You know, as far as prejudice, you might actually be praised by your family or by your social group for insulting someone or bullying someone or being mean. We certainly see this in the rebellious groups. They're more likely to egg on negative behavior and reward negative behavior. Criminal behavior may also experience that kind of operant consequence. Biofeedback, where I actually might develop a sense of high and euphoria, and so that actually will end up reinforcing my behavior because I'm seeking out that kind of euphoric response. And then finally, cognitive social learning. Media is a culprit in prejudice because we can see them modeling, you know, prejudicial attitude or unhealthy behaviors. Violent video games and television also, we are more likely to engage and repeat that behavior. So that's kind of the end of this chapter. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you've taken the time to truly understand how each of these learning theories, classical, operant, and social learning, all apply to your own personal life. And between this and the chapter, I hope you have a really good understanding. I'll look forward to seeing you for the next lecture.